the world, from all over the world. We're 27 years old this year, and we were set up by our publisher, Declan Mead, because at the time in Ireland, he could see that there were a lot of people writing and short fiction, particularly, with no real array of places that they could send their work and have it read. So it was kind of a case of like, I think I see a need here, and I think I'm going to fill it, essentially. So we've kind of kept up in that. With that philosophy, the idea that we are in a way in service to writers. We are a place that they can send their work. We're a place that is going to get their work read and hopefully it's going to get it published. So we are open to writers at all stages of their careers, but we do have a particular interest in new writing and in new writers. That's kind of how we look at it. So we publish short fiction, short stories, we publish essays, we publish novel extracts, and we publish poetry as well.
Oh, that's great. And I actually straight away, it's so encouraging, Lisa, for people to hear that you think of yourself as in service to writers, because it's so intimidating for writers sometimes to be submitting to journals. So that's such a nice way to think about it. And could you just maybe tell us a little bit about your role as editor and what that means in terms of your work with the magazine?
Yeah, so like we do have a team of contributing editors, and we have kind of a particular editor for poetry and we have a particular editor for nonfiction as well. But I am the editor, the one that doesn't get a prefix as the editor. Basically what that means is I am the one who puts the magazine together. I'm the kind of one who curates a lot of the stuff that's in it. I do all the prepping with each writer, particularly for the writers in the fiction sphere. Getting it ready for publication. And what that can mean is something as, as like and we probably get into this later, but the technical kind of things of like fixing each sentence. But it can also mean like just conversing and like having a dialogue with the writer at the very start to kind of say, well, what is it you want? What is it that you were trying to do with this piece? How far do you think you went with it? What do you think you'd like to do with it? And kind of working on it from there. So there is a kind of a case of like working with the writer to make sure that they're happy and that the piece that they're publishing and bringing to the world is what is as close as possible. Because I think as writers here, we always know that our piece of writing is never quite finished. It's like the old saying is just abandoned, but as close as possible to their original idea and what they wanted to do. So it's a lovely thing to be.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much, Lisa. Josie, could you tell us a little bit about Granta and your role there?
Yeah. Yes, Granta is, well, it calls itself a magazine of new writing. It's a quarterly, so we have four that come out each year. And I guess one thing that it is distinctive about it is each of those issues has a theme. So we did varying levels of specificity. So sometimes we'll do quite loose abstract themes, and other times it'll be more specifically connected to a region or to, we did a little bit of an unusual one recently called Dead Friends, which was all about writers sort of writing about sort of finding sort of new forms for memorialization or new ways to approach obituary in a way that was maybe less solemn than maybe the form normally draws. So yeah, there's a theme for each one. And yeah, we publish a big range of things. So we do fiction, memoir, narrative, nonfiction, and we do a lot of work in translation. We have a new editor as of 2023, Tom Meaney, and I think he's also brought a little bit more reportage back to the magazine, which has been interesting to sort of explore. But yeah, I'll focus whether it's fiction, nonfiction is always just about finding writing that feels fresh, maybe somehow approaches a topic in a way that's a bit aslant, and maybe like a big topic approached from an unexpected direction is a thing we're always looking for, really in fiction as well. So yeah, I think that is Granta.
And that's great. I loved the obituaries theme as a concept for the last issue. And maybe just it would be helpful for people to know when you do come up with a kind of a concept like that for the theme, are you then you advertise that and ask people to submit within that theme, or in that case, did you reach out to writers that you've worked with before and ask them would they be interested in writing something specifically for you, or is it a bit of both?
It's always this series of spinning plates that involves all of the above. We write generally to people that were into us before. So maybe like probably the most relevant thing for people who are listening is we would maybe work initially with someone on an online piece, which might not be connected to a theme. We might write to some of those people once we've worked with them once. and put the theme to them, and then they're sort of like given an opportunity maybe to like pitch or submit something for that theme. But we're also, yeah, writing and commissioning to authors and sending things to agents and editors, letting people know about the theme.
Great, thank you so much. And Jamie, tell us all about the London Magazine.
Sure. So the London Magazine publishes fiction, poetry, essays, and reviews primarily. And there are 6 issues of it a year. And we also have our website, which is a bit more loose in terms of the forms that it publishes. We also have interviews and other features. I suppose the main distinguishing fact of the magazine is that it's very, very old. It was founded in 1732. So I think it was technically kind of the second magazine to ever use that word to describe itself. And it certainly has a very interesting history in which, I mean, there's been editors of ours who've died in duels with other editors of other magazines back when maybe literary journalism was taken slightly more seriously. I'm not sure, but yeah, and my role particularly, there is the title editor, like Lisa referred to, the editor without the kind of prefix or suffix, which I'm not. But as a managing editor, I'm responsible for more of the day-to-day running of the magazine. I help to put together the magazine and the production of it. And one thing that I think is we try to be really vocal about is that a lot of the work that we publish comes through our submissions. So particularly I think for today, hopefully that'll be relevant. Obviously we do solicit work, we do commission work, but I would say at every issue, particularly with fiction and poetry, almost the majority, I'd say, yeah, definitely the majority of it is from submissions, and often people who've not been published anywhere else too. And I think that's with a magazine that has a very long history. I think what's nice is that we have this combination of new writers and then more established names, and then you get kind of writers who've been published for the first time getting to say that they were published in a place that published Sylvia Plath back in the day. And I think that's like a really lovely thing about the magazine.
Yeah, that is absolutely lovely. And I'm sure that it's also part of your looking forward to the future. I know you're really keen to bring in more underrepresented, marginalized voices who would not have featured in the magazine, for many of those 300 years. So I know that you have a real effort to kind of expand upon and have more diverse voices there. That's true, isn't it?
That's absolutely true, and we have a pretty well maintained archive, and it's both fascinating and frightening when you go back to. I mean, certainly if you go to the issues from the 18th century, and even more recently, and Alan Ross, who edited the magazine in the 20th century and published some incredible people, you still go back and look at some of those issues, and the lack of diversity is quite galling. So yeah, that's a big thing I think for us in the past couple of decades too.
Yeah, great. So maybe we could just, to start off, I know everyone will want to know a little bit about the actual submission process for you all. So could you tell us how your submissions work, if you're open to submissions all the time, if you have windows, what things can people submit? Are there criteria around your submissions? Just to give us a kind of a sense of how the submission process works for each of you. Jamie, would you like to tell us first about the London Magazine?
Sure. So right now we follow a program of having 1 month of open submissions, then followed by a month where we are technically closed for submissions. But if you want to pay a fee for a kind of out of submission window, you can submit. That's less a kind of money-making scheme and more a way of managing our workload. Because as we'll discuss later, I think as editors, the thing that we're most working with is the scope or the kind of sheer mass of submissions you get. So yeah, 1 month on, 1 month off. And we work through Submittable, which I'm sure is a platform that, again, we might end up discussing today. And if you are a writer who's just getting into the process of submitting their work, that's getting your head around that, I think is going to be very important. So yeah.
Yeah, great. And how about you, Lisa? How does it work then in Stinging Fly?
So as is always the case when you go first, earlier, I should have mentioned that we publish twice a year. So there's 2 issues a year, 240 pages in each issue. So for that, we have 2 open submission windows. The windows are open for 2 weeks. So you have one at the end of May and you have one I shouldn't have said the end of May because it depends. One in May and one in November, and they're for the issue that's coming up beforehand. The majority of what we publish comes through Submittable. It's quite actually increasingly rare that we will use something submit or commissioned. And that's kind of important to us because of our focus on new writers, new writing, is the idea that it should feel like very welcome at every kind of stage for a writer who's maybe really, really new to this to be able to kind of come in. But like it is absolutely true that it is such a kind of a, for want of a better word, it's a really cool thing to be able to publish a writer with their very first story alongside a writer that they have maybe admired or somebody quite established. It's a lovely thing to be able to kind of say, oh, I'm in that issue with so and so, you know. So we have that the open submission policy twice a year. 2 weeks it's open for. We have no kind of stipulations usually. The issue that's coming up next has a special focus on the climate crisis. But generally, we don't have a particular theme, so people are welcome to submit whatever it is they're working on. Obviously, we're more interested in things that lean towards the literary. So, as Josie was saying, something that has a new slant, something that feels very fresh, very original. I always say to writers, the thing that nobody else could have written, the thing that is purely yours, whatever excites you to have written is going to excite us to read. So that's what we do. And once they come in, then we kind of like have our team of readers who are all very experienced, who are all writers themselves, and our contributing editors, and everything gets read, often multiple times. So with the idea that we want to be able to kind of assure people, as I think most literary journals do want to be able to assure people that, yeah, you've taken this work seriously, we're taking it seriously too. And one thing we do like to stress as well is that we would not be able to do this work if you weren't writing and if you weren't sending us what you were writing. If you haven't sent us your work, we can't do the work we do. So it's a lovely kind of relationship in that way.
Okay, excellent. And Josie, how about Granta? How are you managing your submissions over there?
I really love that you said that, Lisa. I think that's really good. Yeah, we also use Submittable, the same portal, which I imagine a lot of people are familiar with. And we open, I think, 4 times a year. We do 4 month-long openings. I think it's a March, June, September, and December. And we do a non-fiction and a fiction section, and people can submit for that. We do charge a fee. We charge £3.50 for the submission, but we also do have low income options. So we always have a sort of, there's a set number of those allocated, and I think it's pretty reasonable actually. We have it quite high, so that I think if people really don't want to be having to pay and they get in quick at the beginning of the month, it's sort of possible for them to not have to pay. But yeah, and all submissions are read and discussed by editors, and it's one of the most it's a wonderful, wonderful part of the job. It's actually fantastic. I think it's an incredible way as an editor to keep your eye in, because you're seeing everything that's coming straight. It's not being filtered by anyone. It's not being filtered by agents or editors. You're seeing what people want to be writing about. And I'm sure other editors have had this experience of really noticing this sort of like almost like collective hive mind
Yeah.
process things as they happen in the world, and you get these sort of like themes that pass through, or you notice patterns. But yeah, we notice stuff that's really extraordinary in each tranche that gets submitted, and we have a commitment to publish in every single cycle, so things always move from submittable into the magazine.
Oh, gosh, yeah, I think it's I'd love you to maybe talk to us a little bit about, I mean, with all of these submissions you're getting, what kind of criteria you use to select. I mean, I love what you said, Lisa, about how you're looking out for things that only this person could have written, so that you feel like you're getting this unique perspective on the world. But what criteria do you use? I mean, how many submissions are you kind of working through, and then how many can you publish, to give us a sense of how many you're having to process? But you know, how do you twiddle those down then to what goes into the magazine?
Who are you asking, Helen?
You go for it, Lisa.
It's just the second you said like how many are coming in and how many get published, I'm like, this is the part you really don't want to be saying, but unfortunately,
Sorry, yes, we're going to have to hold you
so
to
for us,
the
and you know, this is probably at our capacity really at the moment. We get about 3,000 submissions in that 2 week period across the various formats. So like if we're talking about not or short fiction, we're looking at about 1,800 short stories, I think. And then we publish, if we're just looking at short stories, again, 240 pages, we publish maybe about 12 or 13. And you kind of hate to say that, because for somebody to kind of hear that percentages or kind of start kind of thinking about like what the odds are can sound very discouraging. But the thing is, it shouldn't, because there is always something that comes through, as Josie said, something extraordinary that comes through that you go, oh my God, I've never read anything like this. I've never read this person before. This has come from absolutely nowhere, and I'm so excited. And I think that's one of the things that we have to remember as writers when we're approaching editors. All editors want to find something really, really special and something that's new and something they've never read before. That's what we want. We're very excited by it. So like the idea that I think submitting writers can often feel, oh, I have no chance because I get a lot of questions about bios. Like I have no chance because my bio isn't impressive enough. And I'll never get through because I don't have this long publication history. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the work. We're looking for something that's truly exciting. And that can be, I mean, that's such a broad thing. What is it? Like, is it something like the concept is fantastic? Oh my God, or these characters are really, really interesting. Or on a sentence level, this is like something really special. It can be any of those things. It can be none of those things. You know, that's the thing. So when you're whittling it down, first off, it's like quality. Is this really well written? Is this written in a way where we are completely sure of this writer's command of language, what they're doing? They know what they're doing. Their intent is there. Like they are kind of like their personalities all over this piece. But then it will start to get kind of almost arbitrary, because it's going to be a case of, well, I've started to see the issue come together, and I know that this piece works with this piece, works with this piece, and I see the shape of it. And always looking at the odds, always there are going to be fantastic pieces that we're going to have to say no to, and that sometimes you see popping up in another magazine, you're like, yes, thank God. I no longer feel guilty about this. And that's always the case. And I know that doesn't sound encouraging, but I kind of think of it as encouraging for all of us, because there's so much good stuff out there, and there's so much people are really excited to write and to create, and they keep doing it. And that's like, when you think about the world that we're in at the moment, and you think about like the threat of AI, and you think about like all of these kind of like writing by committee and all of this, and to be at the kind of coal face of it and actually see what people are interested in writing is really, really cool. I know I keep saying cool. I'm a great editor, but I'm a terrible speaker. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're absolutely not. You're an amazing speaker. And I actually think there's something about the 12 that each of those people probably sat somewhere hesitating about whether or not they should submit their story, you know, and they couldn't maybe have ever anticipated that theirs would be one that was chosen. So I think people have to just get their skin in the game, and, you know, maybe maybe it's just the thing that
That's
clicks.
exactly it. You never know, do you? You don't know unless you've tried it. And what we've started to do in recent issues too, in the notes and contributors at the end, we have a little legend that shows this is the first time this writer has been published in The Stinging Fly, or this is the first time this writer has been published in print. And they are kind of they're really like heartening to see that as well. And I think hopefully that provides inspiration to people who are looking to submit their work as well.
Yeah, definitely. So Jamie, what about with the London Magazine? What kind of numbers are you dealing with, and how are you reducing those down to whatever pages you have to offer?
Well, I was going to say, first of all, to pick up on something that Lisa said regarding bios, I would say almost the opposite. If I see a submission in which someone has listed the 30 places they've been published, I usually that actually would set me the other way, and I'd think, oh, here we go. So
Yeah,
we can maybe get into the
exactly.
future. Like there are lots of, I think, very small practical things you can do to maximize your chances, which maybe we can talk about later. But that is definitely one of them. In terms of the numbers, I think every month that we have open, we get about 1,000 submissions across all genre. So usually about, yeah, I mean, the maybe 100, 150, 200 pieces of nonfiction, mainly maybe 600 short stories, and then the rest poetry. Um, Again, space is so, we publish three or four stories every issue, and the 6 issues a year. So just like Lisa was saying, it's often the case that there'll be work that we really enjoyed, and it's just a case of we don't have the space to
Yeah.
to publish this. And often even there'll be a story that you might really, really love and think is actually a better story on a certain level, but if it doesn't fit within the kind of the coherence of the issue, then it's not going to make it there. And it's a bit like how there are like competition winning poems, and there are poems that work in a collection, and how if you have a collection of poetry, you can't have all of them be, competition winning ones, because that's kind of exhausting. You can't have all singles, right, if you're doing an album. And I think that works with an issue as well. not every short story can be a fireworks and lightning one, right? You have to kind of balance that out so that those different types of short stories come through. But yeah, the numbers, I agree, they sound depressing, but they're really not as depressing in reality as it sounds. I think the other thing as well that Lisa alluded to is that, you know, as your editors want to like your work, either for the kind of really honest, sincere reasons, and also like editors have egos. Every editor wants to be the person who discovers whoever, right? It's that there. Maybe I'm only kind of telling on myself here, but like everyone wants to be the person who discovers that great new writer. So I think editors are looking for new people and are excited about that. They're not kind of automatically dismissing people who haven't got a publishing history. Often quite the opposite. So yeah, I think once, and I'm sure everyone else on this panel has had this experience, you get to a certain age when you're trying to start writing and sending your work out, because again, almost all editors are writers as well. And it feels so mystifying. But then once you see behind the curtain, you realize that these is normal people just reading through work, and then the stuff that they like and that resonates with them is the stuff that gets published. And it really is as simple as that. And I think that I take a lot of heart from that. And I have a much healthier sense, I think, of my own writing as now working as an editor than I did before. And there is not a kind of any conspiracies out there against people's work. I don't think it's actually quite simple.
Yeah, I think that's so helpful. I think that, I mean, so even with our students, but with doing these panels, there are so many questions that come through where people are anxious about lots of things that have nothing to do with their work. And we really are trying to encourage people all the time to like put their energy into their manuscripts, but it's very hard for people not to worry about the kind of peripheral things that they think might have an impact. Josie, can you tell us a little bit about Granta and your submissions and what you're juggling over there and how you refine down to what gets published?
Yeah, the numbers are similarly like they're comparable, right? It's like 4,000 or 5,000 submissions per window, something like that. And as I said, we commit that we would never not publish in every cohort, and often we'll publish a handful of pieces, either from nonfiction or from fiction. But I think the thing that we also think a lot about with this process is we never really think of it as like a one and done thing. Like this is just about this piece that you send in and that's it. It's either good enough or not, and you just wink out of existence. We're really aware of writers as people who are improving and honing their craft. And we have sort of ways that we respond that acknowledge that. So we have ways, and we'll come back to this maybe about like when you actually really should pay attention if an editor's like, please send me more, because we actually really do want you to send more. And we're not sending those messages lightly because there's a lot of stuff coming in. So if you're getting an email from someone that's saying, oh, like this was quite good, it's not quite right for us, but like, please send me more, that's actually quite a big deal. And you should really pat yourself on the back and take it seriously. So we do send encouraging responses like that sometimes to people where we think there's so much promise, but it just isn't quite working, this particular piece yet. You can tell when someone's got so much promise, it's just so evident, and it can exist alongside a piece not quite yet clicking. And so we would like maybe, yeah, work with those authors. They might write again. We could take note of who's written in the past. And we sometimes give out our personal emails. Like I would give out my personal email outside of the submittable format to say like, write to me with anything else and like, please do. Yeah, so there's multiple ways that I think it can kind of accrue, sometimes people have submitted, we can see, because you can see on the portal, sometimes someone will have submitted like 6 times and then 7th time it's right, it's there. They've been like working on it in the meantime. And we like notice that and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think there's that as well. Like you're sort of getting to know a writer over the course of submissions that they make to the magazine. Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that about how that people should take seriously the kind of personal responses, because I think as writers, we all kind of have a tendency to, believe the negative stuff and not the positive stuff. So when someone gets the rejection, they just hear the rejection and they don't hear the line where you say, please send me something else. And they think that's maybe you trying to soften the blow. So, I think it's really great that you've encouraged people to take that seriously and to see that as the beginning of a potential amazing relationship with an editor and not the end of something. Could you maybe tell us, Josie, just a little bit about you spoke at the top about how some people might be published first on granta.com and then be invited to publish in the magazine, and just to fill us in a little bit more about that opportunity.
Yeah, I think there's kind of this arc that sometimes plays out that I think is just a really wonderful one, which is like maybe we first meet an author through Submittable, and there's a series of ways that they might move through engaging with the magazine that ends with, let's say, a print piece in one of the core, like the 4 issues in the issue. Like maybe they send a couple of pieces, they're offered some notes, they resubmit, we take on a piece for online. The thing about online, as Lisa was saying, you sort of only got so many spots in the print, and particularly for us, because it's themed, you really do have to sort of acknowledge, we sort of really think of the online as a space that liberates us a bit to go off theme. So we can publish stuff that isn't connected to, in this case, like let's say in the winter, the therapy issue. Like it doesn't have to be about therapy online. And so yeah, we would, it's also an opportunity for us to sort of like get to know an author. You really learn a lot about them in the editorial process, and it's sort of like a useful way to gauge whether it's a kind of fruitful collaboration. And yeah, and then we're in touch with them. They hear about the like they're kind of like part of they kind of become a bit of a like part of the fold, really, like hearing about what we're coming out with or reaching out to them, and they kind of get a chance to submit for print. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And so maybe, Jamie, I'd love to pick up on, you said there that there are some practical things that people can do that will, help them with this whole submission process. It would be great to hear from all of you if there are, say, common mistakes that you see people making that kind of get where they're getting in their own way, of their work, or their patterns across submissions that you see that you think, oh, I wish everyone would just stop doing this or start doing this, that would give writers a better chance and that maybe make your lives easier. So, I mean, what were you thinking of, Jamie, when you mentioned this? Are there some things that you think would help everyone?
Definitely. I mean, and I can't overstate how important I think this is, because you've got to remember the context that editors are reading, as we've just said, thousands of submissions, right? And if you're reading thousands of submissions and the one of them makes an effort to be visually well presented, to be concise and clear in what it is and who they are, and then you have one in which you have a biography that goes on for 1,000 words about all the places they've been published, a cover letter which explains to you the themes of the story rather than letting the story kind of say these things themselves, a piece of work that's formatted in Comic Sans or in a font that is inappropriate. And this stuff may sound like very kind of pernickety, but I promise you it's not. I think what you're indicating when you send work is, are you integrated as a reader into this world? Because when you read the books you love, you'll probably notice some things. They're usually kind of justified, the text. They'll be in a serif font, and they'll be presented in a certain way. So if you send in a piece that is in kind of follows none of those conventions, and makes it really difficult for the reader, I think, for the editor to read, I think you are kind of shooting yourself in the foot. Of course, this is not to say that there's only one way of doing things, but I think there are certain conventions that can be helpful. The same thing for poetry. Think of the poem, the collections that you love, and think about how those poems are laid out on the page, and then I would suggest laying your poems out like that when you submit as well. I think it's things as simple as that. I mean, I know of people who, if you really care about a journal and you have this dream idea of being published in one, I see someone in the chat's talking about, they won't die until they're published in Granta, right? So if you want to get published in Granta, I know people who do things like will deliberately submit their piece with the exact same house style as the journal that they're submitting to, that they dream of being published in. And naturally, again, if an editor is reading thousands of stories and they come across a one that is naturally attuned to their own sense of style, because an editor, there'll be a house style for a reason, and the editor will like that house style. They're obviously more naturally going to give it a more generous reading. And obviously, editors try their best to take every single thing, every single piece of work in a vacuum. But we're human, and these things definitely make a difference. So I really can't overstate the practical elements. So big picture, make it look good on the page, and do not spend too much time going into kind of your personal biography. I think you can do a line introducing yourself, a line of some previous publications if you want, and maybe if you feel that there's a part of your identity that's really relevant to the story or your work, that's absolutely fair to mention it. Otherwise, I would just kind of get in and get out, and leave it at that. But maybe there's different approaches across different journals, so I'm not going to say that's the only way.
Great. Josie, what do you think for Granta? Is there anything you've noticed that you'd love to people to take on board before they're submitting to you that might make your life easier and their work more attractive to you?
We're thinking about sort of what Jamie was just talking about, kind of like specifically layout and things like that, and the envelope.
Definitely, if there's any advice you have in that area, or also in regards of the actual writing itself, common pitfalls, or anything that you could advise people on that would just help them make their work more attractive to you,
Yeah.
to the magazine, that would help them get through that initial sifting process.
Yeah, I think you don't need to overthink the presentation and the way that it comes across. I think it's just like being moderate, probably, I'd say, is a good guide for yourself. Like, don't do like size 18 windings, and don't let your bio eclipse your work, is probably what I'd say. Just like as much as possible, just like really like tight, simple, lead us in, and then here's the text, and the text just make it so that somebody who's reading it at 10 p.m. Can literally read the words when they've got like forgotten their glasses. I don't know, just like basic sort of. But I think in terms of like approach to things, I mean, probably people know this already, but I think maybe if I were giving advice to someone, I would probably say like there's realistically this thing that happens when you're reading where you begin, or at least I begin, with total faith. Like you're there, you have like total faith in the piece. You're like, this is you, as we've said, we want it to be the next thing that like delights you and excites you. And you're reading kind of sentence by sentence. And let's say you begin with like total faith in this piece, in this world. That opening page is really important because it's where we get introduced to the world and you demonstrate your control. And I think it's that first paragraph, those first three paragraphs. Obviously, you're going to be honing it as the opening to your piece, but it's worth really like clicking through that and thinking, is there a bum note here? Is there am I in control on this opening page? Because I think there's a beat where an editor will think, okay, this has convinced me to go to the end here. I really want to see the whole shape. Maybe that's a bit honest about the way that an editor approaches a piece, but I think you do have to win them over, I think, in that opening, that they really should give attention to this in a really diligent way.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Anything you can add to that, Lisa, that you've noticed that you'd advise people?
It's really funny because Josie is entirely right, like that first opening paragraph. But I'm finding there's a lot of situations where people have put so much into their first opening
As well, yeah.
and they cannot back it up. So what I'm finding a lot is that somebody has taken to heart this idea of like, oh, open your story in the most exciting place, or open your poem on the most exciting image, or whatever it might be. And then they just it all collapses after the first. It's like it all started when, and you're like, that kind of record scratches. You might wonder how I got here, and like the idea of the story as having an engine and a rhythm has all fallen away because what they're trying to do is like punch you in the face with something really exciting, and they haven't kind of given thought to actually this is supposed to be a full piece. This is supposed to be a full thing. This is supposed to be a journey. So like it's just as you were saying that, Josie, I was like, oh my God, I'm getting more flashbacks here because there's so many of them that just immediately kind of go, okay, there's your exciting opening. Now I'm going to tell you something completely.
It's balance, yeah.
Yeah. And to add to what Jamie was saying, Jamie is so right in the sense of, for me, when you think about the amount of resources that an editorial team has in terms of like time, in terms of people, pairs of eyes to look at things, yes, you want to make it as easy as possible for them. And this idea that like a piece of writing should look like it should be properly formatted. And it makes it easier for us to kind of like engage with it and to get stuck in and to get carried away by the world that you have created. And I was thinking to myself, well, why is that? And Jamie hit the nail on the head. It's because it's basically demonstrated that this writer is not just a writer, they're also a reader. They're engaged with the world that they are trying to kind of enter, as it were. And they take all facets of it seriously. They're not just like somebody who goes, I have something to say, they're actually somebody who's like engaged with writing as an art and reading as an art and stories and everybody's stories. And I think that kind of sense of community is massively important. And it's mad how Jamie just said it there. It's like, that's exactly it. It shows that they're a reader too. I'm finding one of the things I'm finding massively prominent now is that people aren't using paragraphs properly anymore. They're like doing a line break between paragraphs, and I'm like, what happened to an indent? What happened? This is very specific, but it's kind of like, have you ever seen a book where like every paragraph has a line break between it and it's not meant to be fragmented? No, you so like,
Mm.
why is this happening? So I'm just seeing so much of this nowadays, and I teach as well in the University of Galway, and I'm like, if my students did this, I'd be screaming at them. I wouldn't. I would not be screaming at them. I never scream at writers.
And I mean, and just when we talk about there engaging with the world that you want to write in, I guess this might be a good moment to talk about how important it is that people read the magazines that they're submitting to,
Mm.
so that they understand the publication. Would anyone like to comment on that about, just generally your magazines, but all magazines, that if you're going to submit, why it's so important, that you are a good reader of where you're submitting to?
Well, I would definitely say that ultimately it'll make the process more fulfilling because I know that there's a certain kind of writer, and I think a lot of we've probably all done this in the past ourselves as writers, where you finish something, you just want to send it off, you just want to get it published, so you look what's open and you send it to 3 or 4
Yeah.
places, some of which you've never even read any issues or any pieces they've ever put out, and then what happens if this is your story that this is your best story that you've ever written, and it gets picked up by this random place that you've never read and hadn't thought about, and that's the one that gets published, as opposed to a journal that you read and care about, are invested in, interested in as a reader. Then when you send them your best story and they publish it, that's so much more fulfilling. So much more, you become so much more integrated into that world. Like it's not about getting published just for the sake of it. It's about being published in a way that, yeah, it's fulfilling and rewarding, and part of a bigger world of what you want to be as a writer. So I obviously I get the impulse to send stuff out and kind of scattergun it. And I know that every single time anyone asks editors for advice, they say, well, you should read our issues if you want to get a sense of our style. The reason that people say that, I think, is it is just true. And ultimately, if you read widely, it's okay to not like something. If you pick up an issue of a magazine and you realize it's not for you, at the very worst, you've wasted £10 or whatever. And you've given £10 to a literary journal, which I'm sure they will deeply appreciate. So I'd say read widely. It's okay to not like stuff, but cultivate your obsessions. When you cultivate those obsessions, then send your work to them, and then when you do finally get published, it's so much more gratifying.
Yeah, excellent. And literary magazines and journals are such an efficient way to broaden your literary palette. I
Mm.
always say this to the students, that the best thing you can do for your writing is to read as widely and as diversely as you can across multiple forums. So, you can, if you commit to a literary journal and you read it, that's just an amazingly efficient way to do that, and to get exposed to lots of things that might inspire you that you wouldn't even anticipated being the thing that's going to spark something for you. I think it would be so great if we could talk a little bit about your editorial process with writers once they have made it, that you've gone back to them and said that you'd love to publish their story or their essay or whatever it might be. Could you give us a little insight into what writers can expect from you then, in terms of the editing process from there before publication? Josie, could you tell us a little bit about your process with your writers? I know it can be very different depending on the piece of work and the writer, but just give us a little insight.
Yeah, and we're doing, I guess I can talk about both. Yeah, that's a little bit of difference. I think increasingly we've been doing this approach of, when we have time, we speak to people on the phone. It's sort of a new-ish approach that feels like an old approach. Just a quick chat where you talk about maybe this is a particular thing with commissions and nonfiction, where you're figuring out what the intention with the historic piece is and what the sort of most important aspects of it are for the author, because inevitably you've scored through a paragraph in your edit that is the bit that they then say, so the most important paragraph for me was this one. And you're like, oh, that's useful to know. So when we do the edit, we can work through that, or just like find a way to figure out what the kernel was there that clearly hasn't quite yet come across. So if possible, we have a chat. Then we sort of do this thing like big to small. So we'll do structural edit, and then line edit, and then proof. Basically, those are the three. Structural edit's the one where big things are changing, things are moving around. It's the point where we're asking for new material. And then as it sort of like gets more precise. And then so with the line edit, it's a sentence by sentence level. You're tweaking with phrasing, and then at the proof stage, you're making sure there's no typos. Would be our route, basically.
Yeah, excellent. How does that mirror what's happening at the London Magazine, Jamie? Do you take a similar approach, or how do you do it?
Yeah, literally almost exactly the same. And it's nice to hear it kind of expressed in that idea of big to small. I think naturally the process of as you work through production towards a proof, kind of lends itself towards that. But yeah, often though, I mean certainly with poetry, for example, we will almost never make edits. I think I've made one edit suggestion to a poem ever in my life, and then the poet was ultimately happy with it, but then came up to me at the launch for the magazine and said, "Oh, when you suggested that, I wanted to kill you." I realized you were right, and I was like, "Okay." So in the end, but yeah, so poetry we very rarely make any edits. Fiction, there's certainly kind of maybe moments of like line edits and structure and tinkering, and then with non-fiction pieces, I think that's kind of where there's the most scope, I think, for bigger, more structural overhauls. But yeah.
Well, luckily for you, you've all that experience of literary jewels to draw upon, JD. So if such things happen, you
Never
can-
worry, Dave.
And how about you, Lisa? Do you deviate from this process at all, or anything special about what's happening with the stinging fly magic?
I mean, it's all special and it's all magic, but no, it's the same. It's the same idea. So you have the chat, the big kind of structural stuff, and then the line edit, and then the proof. That is kind of how it's done. I feel very validated now, actually. I also want people to pay attention to the fact that being an editor is a very dangerous job, as Jamie has just pointed out, and we are saints, basically.
Great. So we've had some questions coming through, and some have sent them through to me directly. So we'll fly through some of these and see. Anyone can jump in if you can help us resolve some of these queries people have. So one person has asked, can you explain what it means when outlets accept story submissions on an all rights basis? That they've noticed that this comes through. Accepting short story submissions on an all rights basis. Well, maybe more generally, you could talk about the rights in terms of after a work has been submitted for publication, you could clarify for people what that means in terms of your publications.
It really, I mean, I think it really depends, I think, on the place, what level of rights are being requested. It's important to say that I think whenever you should always read any agreement that's sent to you and figure out what rights the magazine are asking for. It's always negotiable. Not everybody has an agent to negotiate on their behalf, but I think everybody can read through, do a bit of Googling, figure out what is being requested of you. It might be that they're asking for regional rights. It might be that they're asking for a set period of exclusivity. And I'd also just pay attention to whether there's any limitations on whether you can include it in a book at a later point, or your right to republish them. At Granta, we have a system where all rights revert to the author by a certain point of time, but we ask like 6 months exclusivity or something like that, which is basically where we don't want you to then just go publish it. We've just paid you some money for it and you're going to resell it somewhere else for the same amount of money and have it out somewhere else in the same week. So we just have that basic requirement, but it's always worth just asking. I think you can just email the person who sent you the agreement and say, can I just double check what this would mean for me with my piece? And these are my hopes for it. And will this inhibit that in any way? And they'll be honest with you. I think you just put it on them to explain what they're asking from you, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely great advice, Josie. And the Society of Authors are also amazing, of course, if anyone wants to get some independent advice on any contracts. So I think it's always good, as you say, to read everything, make sure you understand what you're signing, and, as you say, ask questions if you're not clear. So a question here from that asks, can you give any advice for academics who are used to writing in a more scholarly way in terms of academic essays, but would like to translate that work into more narrative nonfiction, creative nonfiction? Have you any advice for using your research in for a more mainstream readership? Anyone want to take this one on?
This is interesting because this does come up sometimes. So you got a really good concept for a piece of nonfiction that's been sent in, and it's that the person really knows what they're writing about, but they're either coming from an academic or maybe a journalistic background. And you find yourself kind of going, okay, one of the things that we do not need is all these quotes backing up what you're saying. I don't care what Joan Didion said. I want to hear what you have to say about this. I don't need you to kind of back it up. So there's often a case with creative nonfiction that we find is it's kind of asking, where are you in this piece? And it's a funny one because you were trained out of that in so many other styles of writing. You were asked to kind of like put it forward in quite a formal tone, or, you know, to keep as much of yourself and your opinions and all of this kind of subjectivity out of it. And actually, we want you to put all of that back in. It's not, I can't kind of give a really simple way to do it. But it is something that comes up, and I think it's kind of like a case of maybe unlearning all your good manners, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's very useful. Josie or Jamie, have you anything to add to that from your experience of for people using their academic work in a more literary journal?
I will say people writing. I've had this experience recently, actually. It was a really fun one because in the end we kind of found a way to work through it. I think a lot of academics get trained out using the I. They're like fearful of it. It's scary. Don't want to say I this or I that. And actually it can be a really detached piece. And just having the courage actually to step outside of that detached like voice and put yourself in the story, as Lisa was saying, like be able to sort of, which is also kind of like one of the key things we're looking for in an essay, is we always think as a literary piece, the author is in the story. You're not pretending that you're this sort of rarefied, all-seeing critical eye that doesn't exist as a person. But I think that's initially a little challenging because it's been trained out of academics over the years. So just trying that, basically, take a risk with it.
Yeah, great. It's that moving from, I think, objectivity to subjectivity,
Exactly.
you know, which is, you know, can be so challenging. But yeah, I think that's really going to be really encouraging. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, because someone has asked how you feel about writers using AI to help them polish their writing before they submit. How would you react if you realized one of your submissions had been written with the help of AI? I mean,
What is the
Lisa, your
point?
face is saying a lot here. I don't know if everyone can see you, but
I do not get this. Like, what is the point? You've written something and you've gotten a robot to help you kind of soften out the angles. And I know we can kind of say, well, that was probably what people back in 1991 used to say about spell checkers. You know, perhaps they did. Um, but you're basically taking something that was entirely you, created by human intelligence, human emotion, like human subjectivity. You've done that, and now you've decided to buff off the edges and to make it more palatable, to make it more like, to make it less you. Like, fair enough. I mean, like, sometimes we get submissions in that you kind of go, well, that was AI. You know, it's really obvious because it's such a dead voice. It's such a it's such a nothing voice. There's nothing of anybody in there. It often has, because we're an Irish magazine, it often has these horrible Irish stereotypes in it, and you're like going, oh God. But like, beyond that, it's like, so what if you managed to do this and you managed to kind of like you know, create a more polished piece, you feel? Yeah, great. And maybe an editor won't spot that. Yeah, great. And where are you in that? What have you done for it? Where is it? Is it still yourself? Is it still your own work? Do you really feel proud of it? Do you feel like this is all you? That's what we're responding to. We're responding to the human. So I feel quite passionately about it, but I feel quite passionately about it not just as an editor, but as a writer myself, because I often think, what's it like if you're going to feed a prompt in? Why? Where is the joy in that? Where's the mess? You know, like, this is, I don't know, maybe I'm an old romantic, I don't know. I'm very interested to hear what the other editors have to say.
and I think it goes full circle to where you started at the very beginning, Lisa, which is that, you know, what we desperately want for all writers is that they feel confident about using their own voice, you know, and not surrender to the anxiety of influence of other writers, but also the idea of the anxiety of influence of a machine instead of your own voice just seems a whole other thing. But yeah, I'd love to hear, Josie, Jamie, what you think about this.
Well, I mean, I certainly agree with Lisa, and I think you know, even more specifically, I think the parts of, if you are putting your finished piece which you have written into AI to ask it to, again, like, kind of polish the edges, I think that so much of writing is that final part, so you're never going to get any better at that, so that will not serve you well in the long run. So that is, can also be a really satisfying part as well. Those kind of final little tinkering. Of a piece. So to kind of deprive yourself of that, I think would be strange. Equally, again, as Lisa said, you know, it's not like you're going to be making millions from writing literary fiction, most likely. So why bother? You know, if you do it, if you're not doing it for the joy, then yeah, I think you're doing the wrong thing, maybe, because there's not that much, there's not really a commercial imperative, particularly. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, great. Josie, anything to add?
I'm gonna be on the same side of the debate, but I think maybe my answer is a bit of a romantic one. I think writers should sort of off the back of what Jamie said, like you should take yourself really seriously. Like I think you have a voice, you have something to say. I don't think you need to be giving this to someone, something else to say it. And obviously there's a spectrum and we've all used words like proofing techniques and like let it do the underlining thing to say this is misspelled and none of us think that's cheating in some way. But I do think ChatGPT and these sorts of AI things are really a lot more invasive. And they sort of, I think it almost can cause an atrophying of the skill sets required to write elegantly in a limpid, precise, interesting prose. And it's a shortcut. So if you're like, you've got, like, say you've got something you've written and you think it's a bit messy, it's a bit punky, you throw it in this AI model, it comes back with a sheen. That might seduce an editor initially, but in the long run, if you're actually trying to do something really valuable with your voice, I think that you should be forcing yourself to learn those skills yourself because there's a certain level that ChatGPT and all these things are never going to achieve. They're never going to manage that. So it's almost inhibiting your learning process and your ability, your ear, your capacity to tweak a sentence. That's the thing. It's like not going to the, it's like taking steroids rather than going to the gym. I just think it should be honed and it's a beautiful, gorgeous process of honing technique, in my opinion.
Yes, that is such a great answer. I'm so glad this question came up. My goodness. So thank you all so much for sharing your insights on that. I think we only have like a couple of minutes left. So maybe what would be great is if I could just ask you all if you have any last words of wisdom, any advice. There are a lot of writers who obviously are terrified about submitting to journals. It can be a very make people feel extremely vulnerable, especially at the very beginning of the writing career. Maybe they've never showed work to anybody and they're thinking about submitting for the first time. So any last words of wisdom, words of encouragement, you know, for those who are thinking about submitting to you to finish us off this evening. Josie, we'll start with you if that's okay.
Just sort of like final things to say.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like general thoughts. Just I think people should be sort of what is it just now, just have patience with yourself and have
Yeah.
I just think that I think there can be like a real again, I feel like I'm a little old-fashioned, but I think there's something like really, really satisfying about a life of honing a skill like this. Like writing is one of the most beautiful, gorgeous systems that we have. And you can throw all this focus into just like getting a thing, you know, submitted and into places in this, but actually just honing your relationship with this beautiful language can just be, I think, be the pleasure of a lifetime and is something that we're maybe all doing and taking that joy into the process of it and not losing it, I think is a lovely thing to sort of keep you honest and keep you motivated in a good way.
Yes, thank you, Josie. That's beautiful. Lisa, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, just very quickly, because I saw one of the questions I just saw popping up. Somebody asked, do we pay attention to the names of writers who have submitted multiple times and whose work we're keeping an eye on? Yes, we do. And I will go back in there and I'll cherry pick them to read myself. So absolutely. And the thing, I'm going to say something really nerdy for my final thought. A lot of people kind of ask, like, you know, how do I do this? How do I get better? How do I kind of finish the piece? How do I get to this particular point? And like at the end of the day, it does boil down to the fact that whatever story you have in your head is yours and nobody else is going to write it for you. Absolutely nobody. So where I'm going to get nerdy is that the quote that I use and have used and will continue to use for this is from Lord of the Rings, and it's Elrond saying to Frodo, I think that this task is appointed for you, and if you do not find a way, no one will. And I think that's a lovely thing to kind of think of this as this is the thing that you do. This is the thing that is special. This is the thing that is unique. And if you cannot sit down and write it out, then that story stays there.
Mm.
He sees it.
You give me goosebumps, Lisa. Give me
Stop
goosebumps.
that. Well,
Minute.
some of that was Tolkien now.
Jamie, how about you to finish us off?
I mean, I have no idea how to finish or to follow those two answers because they're both so true and insightful and actually and moving really. I say I agree. I think that you know, especially in the context of the AI conversations we were having, to focus all your attention on a craft and an act of doing something, but without distraction is genuinely, I think, kind of like a radical act in the world that we kind of currently live in, and that should be protected. And you know, being published is great, and that feeling is amazing, and that you should, it's healthy, I think, to chase that to a certain extent. But yeah, I think Josie is absolutely right. You have to be doing it really for the craft and for that feeling of continuously improving and embedding yourself in the work. So I would say that, and also then, and very finally, and maybe quite tritely, like, get used to also being rejected, because it's, you know, if you get rejected at the start, do not let that demotivate you. I think most people's submittables, and even the most widely published and successful authors, would be rejected, 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 accepted, rejected, rejected, rejected. Like, everyone gets rejected more than they get accepted. I think everyone. I'm not sure how that makes mathematical sense, but it's true.
Yeah, great. Oh, listen, you have been just the most amazing panel. Just listening to you, I feel inspired and rejuvenated in my own writing practice. You're making me want to go and work immediately when I hang up off the call. It's been absolutely incredible to be in your company for the last hour, and I hope everyone listening at home found it useful. I'm sure they did, because you've been so insightful and profound and frank with your answers, and it's so generous of you to share your time and your expertise with us all. So thank you so much for being here. If anyone ends up publishing with you after being on our panel, please let us know. That would be so nice to know that you were inspired tonight and submitted work and it made it through. For everyone who is still working, it might be interesting for you to know that we have 3 incredible writing workshops coming up as part of this series. We're doing a short story workshop with Elaine Feeney, an amazing Irish writer. We have a children's fiction workshop with Liz Hyder, who won the Nero Award for children's fiction this year, and a memoir writing workshop with Hannah Lowe. So you can join us for those that are all happening over the next few weeks too. But for now, just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us this evening. My goodness, we have 115 people still here at 8 o'clock on a hot Thursday night. So it just shows that the writing energy is alive and well out there, which is great. And thank you so much, Josie, Jamie, and Lisa, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck, everyone. Keep going. Bye.
Yeah.